You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, my name is Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctors In podcast, and this is episode 134. And today we want to kind of continue our discussion from the last episode where we talked about the 4 stages of health, basically the journey that takes place as you go from being healthy and move towards disease. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, then I would suggest going back and starting with that one. It's really a good episode to kind of give you an overall, kind of like an airplane view of what happens as you go from being healthy and move towards disease. And of course, our premise here at our clinic is that you don't go to bed healthy tonight and wake up diseased tomorrow. It's actually a journey that takes place. There's a road, and that road can take months, years, decades, really, depending on what's going on. Yeah. And because you don't go to bed healthy and wake up diseased tomorrow, the body gives you a bunch of clues all the way throughout the process. And so last week, we talked about the different clues that the body gives you in different stages. So again, we would encourage you, if you haven't heard that episode, to go back and listen to the episode we just did previously to this one. Today, what we want to do is we want to kind of continue the discussion, and specifically, we want to talk about 5 or so blood tests that we would recommend that you ask your doctor. When you go in to get your standard testing done, there are 5 things that, and there's a couple other like kind of bonus ones on there, but there are a few things that you want to make sure that you ask your doctor to check that they generally don't always check.
And if your doctor's not thinking outside the box, they often won't. That's all right. I mean, in a sense. But I always tell people, look, it's best if you go to your doctor. And I know sometimes doctors don't like this or whatever. I always tell people, go to your doctor prepared. Bring questions, because people come to me, and a lot of times, man, oh man, they got a notebook out. And they've got questions that, especially on their follow-up, right, with me. First time, I do a lot of I tell them what's going on. And, I'm asking them questions and blah, blah, blah. But then I give them all the information all our findings. But when they come back, I encourage that so much. Ask. If you're not sure, ask me, because what about this and what about that? And you know what? The idea, and we mentioned in the last program, is that health, it's a journey, but you got to be all in on this. Like, it's important for people. Health is there anything more important when you think about it?
Well, it's taken for granted until you don't have it anymore.
Exactly.
Right? And then you find out that there is nothing more important. There's nothing worse than not being healthy.
Yeah.
There's so many people that listen to our podcast every week, and, a lot of them aren't healthy. A lot of them are frustrated because they don't feel well, or they're going through a disease. And I'll tell you, health becomes so much more important when we don't have it.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a lot of things in life that are like that, right? Yeah. Relationships, we take advantage in a sense, or we don't understand how important they are until they're broken. And then all of a sudden we understand how important they were. Health is just one of those things that...
Don't neglect it.
Don't neglect it. And, I remember reading this a long time ago. There's a very powerful kind of psychological principle that we live by that we don't even realize it. And it kind of guides us in a lot of ways. And the idea is that because it's never happened before, it never will. And, we do a lot of things in life, and the consequences never happen, so we don't think it's even possible that it can happen until it happens, right?
Exactly.
And health is kind of like that. Every day we kind of go about our business and we're doing these things, and then all of a sudden our health, well, I won't get heart disease. I've never had heart disease. I'm not going to.
Yeah, or it's not in my family.
That's why prevention is hard to talk about, because you're talking about stuff that's never happened to them before. And we just, as humans, if it has never happened to us before, we don't think it's ever going to happen to us.
Well, I'll give you an example of that, too. It's just kind of funny because I remember a lawyer told me this one time, because people would come in to see him to do their will, and they would say, well, if I die, this is what I want to happen, right? He says, you mean when you die? He said, no, if I die. I said, I think It's not if, it's when you die, right? I mean, he got me laughing about that.
The fact is that as you move through life, our health will change. Very few people live a long life and never have any health concerns at all.
Well, it's quite rare, right?
Yeah. So the reality is it's something that is going to happen to everybody. But again, it's one of those things that we just don't think about too much until it actually happens. Now, our audience is different in a lot of ways because they're actively seeking out health information. They're actively doing things to take care. We got, in our private Facebook groups for people that are in some of our programs, I mean, we got so many amazing people in there, right? And they ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. They're really in.
They ask a lot of questions.
They're implicated in their health.
And I
love that.
So do I. I like when somebody's asking questions is because they're interested, right? When somebody's not interested, they generally don't ask a lot of questions. Now, when it comes to your doctor, it could be hard to ask questions. It's not that you're not interested in it. Yeah. It's just that the environment, especially in our system here, our socialized medicine system here in Canada, they're busy. They're busy. I feel sorry for a lot of those guys. They're really busy. Yeah. And they don't have time to sit there and answer questions. So people bring in these lists, and a lot of doctors will have a thing where you can ask one question.
You can't ask two.
No, it's so ask me one question, and it's like how are you doing? Great. Okay, can I ask you a question? Well, you just did. Now, of course, that's not how it is, but this that's the reality is that you don't have a lot of time. A lot of times, too, these doctors have thousands of patients, and you see them if you were to add up the amount of minutes that you see them in a year, it could be like 2 minutes. Right? I mean, at the end of the year, it could be a 2-minute thing. All they have on you is a file. That's to them, they know you, or, some doctors know you. They're very personable, but that's what they have on you. Whereas when you leave there, you are with yourself all the time. That's why we like to tell people kind of be prepared, ask questions. Or if they're not going to ask questions, when they go for your standardized blood testing, ask that these things are on there. Now, some of these things in Canada, you got to kind of pay a little bit extra for, but the cost is worth it for a lot of these things.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so now that we've kind of got that long introduction out of the way, let's talk about a few things a few tests that we would strongly recommend that you include in your when you get your blood testing done next time. Now, again, our biomarker testing, we recommend because, as we mentioned last week, it's kind of that stage 2 stuff where stuff doesn't show up in traditional blood tests, but things are off, like leaky gut, cortisol is starting to elevate, or there's insulin. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we look at, heavy metals and deficiencies and all these kind of things. So that's very important. But here are 5 things, and we'll go through them. So one of the first things that we like to have people check all the time is their triglycerides.
Yeah. Not cholesterol.
Yeah, and
they're going to do your cholesterol, but every time they do your cholesterol, they always do triglycerides. It's part of your blood lipids. When you get your results, they don't call you. But you see today, I think a lot of times you can get your results. A lot of people go online.
Yeah, you can log in now here at least.
Yeah, at least, a lot of my patients
can.
But
a lot of the numbers, they don't mean a lot. Then they'll Google them.
Yeah.
And then you go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly.
We go over a lot of results.
Now, triglycerides, why is that important?
Well, first of all, triglycerides is they try and make cholesterol the boogeyman. You can't live without cholesterol. As a matter of fact, I always say this, God didn't trust you enough to eat enough cholesterol, that it only 15% comes from your diet. The other 85% come from your liver. And there's a reason for it. You need cholesterol. Your cells are made up of cholesterol.
Your brain,
your hormones are made up of cholesterol. Your brain is made up of cholesterol. You don't live without cholesterol. So they made cholesterol the boogeyman, right? They made it part of heart disease. And, anyway, we don't want to go overboard, but the idea is I always tell my patients, look, cholesterol, schmolesterol, I want to know what your triglycerides are, okay? Because biochemistry-wise, that is the boogeyman. That is the bad guy. And look, there ain't a drug in the universe for triglycerides. What triglycerides are controlled by is the amount of sugar, crappy carbohydrates that you are eating. You want a measurement of where you're at? You want to know where your liver is at? I mean, you can do liver enzymes, but before or during fatty liver and whatever, your triglycerides are going to be elevated. If they're beyond 1.71, you've got elevated triglycerides and you're in trouble.
And it's interesting. Speaking of triglycerides, I just read a study that came out not too long ago, and they found, well, they've known this, but what they found about this was fascinating. Your triglycerides cross your blood-brain barrier. So, again, your brain is really well protected. You have a barrier, they call it a blood-brain barrier, that kind of filters out junk from getting in there, and it's supposed to stop a lot of stuff that gets into your blood, even though old-time medicine guy says your blood's sterile. Your blood's clean. There's nothing in there. Now they're finding out, it's not necessarily even closely remotely to the truth.
Yeah.
But you have a last line of defense is your blood-brain barrier. So, yeah, it may get into your blood. It may circulate through your body, but your brain's protected. However, now they're finding out that that blood-brain barrier, the same thing that plugs the holes in there is the same thing that plugs the holes in your gut. So the same thing that kills the stuff in your gut kills the blood-brain barrier. So your brain becomes leaky. We talked about that before.
Leaky gut, leaky brain.
But what they found interesting is that your triglycerides actually cross your blood-brain barrier. And one of the effects of that is it actually affects your hunger, meaning you feel hungry. And it's kind of funny, right? Because triglycerides is basically an indication that you're consuming too much energy in a lot of ways, right? So you're moving things into storage. It's circulating into storage. It crosses your blood-brain barrier, and then you feel hungry all the time. So it's kind of a catch-22. You're overeating, and by all accounts, you've consumed enough energy. You shouldn't feel hungry at all. The way that we're made, our hormone system should be telling us, hey, stop doing this. But it becomes so messed up because of these triglycerides that are crossed. One of the reasons why. There are other things as well that happens. But triglycerides play a role as well in hunger. So keeping your triglycerides down actually helps quite a bit with hunger. But it's just an interesting kind of an aside. But so the first thing that we would recommend, and this is done on standardized testing, but we would encourage you to kind of find a little bit more information about your number there, would be triglycerides. So that's the first one. Let's talk about another one that we recommend people get all the time, which is your C-reactive protein, or CRP for short, which is an indication of inflammation levels in the body.
And very silent. Most people don't have arthritis, and most people don't have symptoms that they know of, at least, of having inflammatory markers. That's what I love about thermography. Right, in our office, I mean, a lot of people light up like a Christmas tree because they're they have so much inflammation. So we don't have to do the C-reactive protein test per se, but C-reactive protein is a marker, and if it's high, you have an inflammation thing going on, and that is part of the process. It's not the first thing that happens in your body, right? As your body heads towards disease.
Yeah, something has a cause of inflammation.
Like inflammation.
It's not spontaneous. It's not a magician.
Spontaneous. It can be a lot of things, but it is a good marker.
Oh, no,
and
that
so
is a tremendous
your
marker.
doctor, because a lot of times only rheumatologists will traditionally do a CRP, a C-reactive protein, but they're showing a real link between inflammation and heart disease, a real inflammation between inflammation in cancer, inflammation and Alzheimer's, dementia, and all this. You want to know how much silent, and the only sign sometimes that you have inflammation, the only symptom that you might have is you might not have any pain at all. You could be burning inside, like inflammation, but you have no pain. And so you're not necessarily started attacking your joints or whatever, but you usually are fatigued.
Yeah, usually energy's an issue.
Yeah, energy's an issue. That's something common I see.
And from an anti-aging standpoint, a lot of studies have shown that inflammation is the chronic accelerator of aging. Yeah. Those that have higher inflammation levels are aging on the inside quicker, so they tend to have a much higher biological age. And again, if you want to know more about anti-aging, we did 3 very good podcasts on anti-aging, so you can go back and listen to those. But even from a aging perspective, you want to keep your inflammation levels low. High inflammation levels indicate something's going on. Yeah. It's an effect. It's not a cause. It's an effect. There's something going on there. So that's another good one to get done. So far we've talked about triglycerides and C-reactive protein. Another one that we like a lot as well are your vitamin D levels.
Yeah, your dihydroxy 25, right? And again, in Ontario, in the wisdom of the government, I hate to be negative, they decided several years ago that this shouldn't be a standard test because all they think of when they think of vitamin D is they think of bones, right? So if a doctor is suspicious that you have osteoporosis or osteopenia, then OHIP apparently pays for it, okay? I mean, in terms of our provincial government here. But you know what? Every cell in your body has a little antenna for a receptor for vitamin D. Your body doesn't work properly.
Well,
your immune system doesn't work properly.
It's one of the best indicators of all-cause mortality.
Yeah.
And what we mean by that is that it's strongly correlated to all-cause mortality. So the higher your blood D3 levels are, the less likely you are to die.
Of almost anything.
Yes.
I mean, cancer, we know specifically.
Well, especially,
we've talked many a times about breast cancer and prostate cancer.
It's a good way to prevent it in a lot of ways, but also your mortality while you have cancer is much higher if your blood levels of D are higher. It's one of those deficiencies that is so common. We also kind of argue a little bit over the range that they use to determine what's normal, what isn't normal.
Yeah, you got to be just about dying for your vitamin D to be out of that normal range. But to be in an optimal range is where you want to be to, in terms of prevention for cancer and autoimmune, and all these things are very, very important. Vitamin D really, really tells you where your immune system is at, too, if you want to test. And again, so get your dihydroxy-25 vitamin D test done. Ask your doctor. There's the commercials in the United States, the pharmaceutical commercials. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're always saying, ask your doctor if this drug is good for you. You know what you need to do, folks? You need to ask your doctor for tests.
Yeah.
That's what, your doctor should tell you
drug companies want you going and asking about drugs. Go in and asking for some blood tests.
Yeah, and they don't allow it in Canada, but the United States, they're big down there.
But we get all the commercials, so.
Yeah, we see them. But
they get the secondary effect.
Ask your doctor, get your CRP, C-reactive protein done. Get your vitamin D testing done. Get the things that we're talking about.
Let's talk about a fourth one that we like as well.
Triglycerides.
Which is your blood omega-3 levels. Now, if you can get your omega-6, omega-3 index, even better, because there's a ratio between omega-6s and omega-3s. Now, long story short, all the processed foods and all the way that we consume food today, we have super high levels of omega-6s.
27 to 1, I think you said.
It was 17 to 1.
17
and it
to
might
1?
be higher than that now, but it was at one point 17, 18 to 1, which means that we have 17, 18 times more omega-6s than omega-3s.
This is a major cause of inflammation.
And a major cause, in my opinion, of
insulin.
Well, yeah, insulin for sure, but also autoimmune disorders.
Yeah, big time.
I think it causes irritation of the gut levels, but that's we can talk about autoimmunes another time.
But that's a good thing, yeah.
So
you'll probably
get
have to
that
pay
index.
for that, right?
The closer you are to 1-to-1, the better off. And I mean, there are studies showing, for example, if somebody has a high index and then they lower it down to even 4-to-1, most of the stuff they're complaining about goes away. Yeah. It goes away, from headaches to whatever. I mean, there are study after study showing the benefits of that. But if you can't get that done, then at least get your omega-3 levels checked. Because, again, high omega-3 levels are awesome for your brain, less likely to have dementia, Alzheimer's.
Can I mention something about something brand new that just came out? That's your blood-brain barrier. We always talk about, having enough good bacteria. What happens in your gut happens in your brain. Do you know what makes up, I didn't know this, part of your blood-brain barrier is DHA.
I was going to say DHA because that's what we're talking about.
But seriously, I read a study yesterday.
Well, it makes sense, right?
It makes sense, right?
The cell walls are fatty, right? And it only makes sense that omega-3s and DHA specifically would play a big role in the health. Well, it's the preferred source of your brain, so that makes sense. I understand. I understand that.
Anyway, I just
but
read that
goes to show
Did
you
you
the
know
importance that DHA,
you probably did.
I did, but that's all right. That's all right.
I can't fool you.
But it is important. Nonetheless, it's one of those things, again, that just rarely is checked on a standardized test. So if you get a chance, try to get the index done. But if you can't, then just try to find out what your omega-3 levels are. And then, again, like vitamin D, the more normal your omega-3 levels are, the better off you are across the board.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting to find out, and this is something that I can look up probably, is the correlation between C-reactive protein, so inflammation markers in the blood, and DHA or omega-3 levels. I bet you if you had high omega-3 levels, your CRP would generally be much lower.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. They're very anti-inflammatory when you get,
Yes.
we just know that about omega-3 in general, right? And especially DHA. I mean, we know how anti-inflammatory that is.
Yeah, the big problem, we've done a presentation before on DHA, and one of the big problems, when somebody comes in and says, I took it, I didn't notice any difference, is because they didn't take enough of it.
Yeah.
But again, you can go to our website. We got videos on that specifically. Let's talk about one more. We're running out of time, so let's talk about one more quickly here that we like as well, and it's that hemoglobin A1C testing, which it's basically
it's an average, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an average over the last 2 to 3 months of your blood sugar. And so it's a good kind of like it's like a trailing indicator in a sense. What were the last 2-3 months of your blood sugar, and then you get this number. And obviously the worse that number is, the more your sugar levels were messed up. So it's a good indicator, again, that insulin is fluctuating. And if you got a high number, then you got high circulating insulin as well, for sure. There are other ways to find out if you got high circulating insulin, but that's not a bad way to find out as well. So that's
oftentimes not traditionally, or at least not always done.
No, right? Unless they specifically ask for like a full sugar profile, they generally won't. Not always ask for that, right? They'll do a CBC and they'll do the chem screen and they'll do all those kind of things, but they'll check the liver enzymes and that. But these are kind of other things that are important. Now, we can talk as well about men and women getting your testosterone levels checked, free testosterone, because that's so many implications with that. Women getting your estrogen checked, thyroid hormone, but they tend to do thyroid a fair amount nowadays because so many women are having thyroid issues, where you and I would say that the thyroid, if it's Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune, then it's an autoimmune disease that's affecting the thyroid. So you could treat the thyroid, but you're not fixing the autoimmune part of it. And a lot of times, if it's thyroid's off, they go on meds, but the thyroid really wasn't the initial problem to begin with, so the meds don't help them feel any better. But they do check thyroid a lot more than they used to.
Yeah, and it's a good idea. Just, again, if you're armed, you're going to see your doctor. I want a full panel done on my thyroid testing.
Yeah,
right?
Everything. Not just, everything. But,
not just TSH, right?
So we're pretty much out of time. But, again, the point of this episode is when you do go to your doctor and you work up the nerve to ask him for, because a lot of people can't do that. Some can, no problem. But a lot of people have a hard time doing that. Then I would recommend at least trying to get those added tests done if they're not going to do them.
Bring your bouncer with you.
Yeah, that's right. And using that information, then you can get a little bit better idea than just a standardized testing to see what's going on. Again, I'd encourage you, if you haven't, to go back and listen to our last podcast, because we do talk about biomarker testing and the importance and kind of where that slots in. Now, you can get biomarker testing done, because even if somebody's diseased, we like to do biomarker testing. Because
get your biomarkers done once a year, and for some people twice a year. Get it done. Yeah. I mean, you talk about prevention big time and letting you know exactly where you're at.
So we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, then I would strongly recommend that you go on our website, martinclinic.com, and sign up for our newsletters. We send out a few emails every week and our podcast as well. Also, if you have any questions, you do a Facebook Live every Thursday morning.
Yep.
And you can go there.
We have a great time.
Yeah.
Well, at least I do.
Yeah, well, like I said, we always kind of tune in at first to see the technical difficulties that may arise from...
I'm talking to a lady in Florida that watches every Thursday, and she said, I really, upside down, sideways, and you do that on purpose? I said, no, I don't know what I'm doing. That's the point.
We can attest to that. We can definitely attest to that. But so you do a Facebook Live every Thursday, and you answer so many questions. It's amazing. You're out there. You'll stick around even 45 minutes or so, answer people's questions. So it's a great way to get your questions answered as well. So again, we want to thank you for listening. Have a great day.